mountain range that is Jerusalem and the cities around it, which we'll talk about this morning. We're looking across the Jordan River Valley, the Syrian-African Rift Valley, where the Dead Sea is, and we're looking to the mountains in Jordan over there. And as we look at this landscape, and as we look down below and sort of laugh at all of those sad people in their cars waiting in traffic to get somewhere, we can perhaps appreciate that the route, the transportation route just below us, is actually a very ancient transportation route. We know this because of some of the archaeology that's been done in this area. And it connects the cities of Jerusalem, right? Obviously, ancient Jerusalem was much smaller than the Jerusalem of today. So ancient Jerusalem, which is just to our north, following that route, to the city of Bethlehem, which is just around here on the right side, right? If you can't see it on that side, you can see it on this side. So we're just now here at Tantur on this hill, situated in between the cities, or the ancient cities of Jerusalem and Bethlehem, right? Which, as far as we can understand, certainly from our textual narratives, we're very much connected, right? Those cities often shared certain stories. One particular story that I just want to share with you very briefly, we get from the book of Genesis. We're going to talk a lot about the book of Genesis today, partly because that's where we see a lot of beginnings, right? Pun intended. That's why it's called Genesis. So in the book of Genesis, there's a story that I assume many of you know well. If not, just pretend. and then tonight you can go back and read up and figure out where you missed it. In Genesis 35, hold on one second. Here we go. In Genesis 35, we read of a young man named Jacob, who has just had a rather formidable experience, shall we say, with the God of his ancestors, right? At that point, his ancestors, not a very long story, right? It's only a couple generations. He knows his ancestors quite well. But the God that spoke to his grandfather Abraham and to his father Isaac apparently is now interested in developing a relationship with him. And so Jacob has this moment of struggle, as we often say, right? A struggle or a wrestle, right? It gets translated in different ways. And at the end of that interaction, right? Or maybe it's physical, maybe it's spiritual, maybe it's both. What happens to Jacob as a result of this struggle with God? Anybody remember?
He's struck in the head.
What?
As a limb.
He does, yes. Something else, a little bit maybe more momentous, happens to Jacob. I'll give it away.
Jacob's ladder.
His name is changed. His name is changed. There's also Jacob's ladder. That's also sort of a part of the bigger story. So I just want to read to you from Genesis 35, and you'll see how it might actually pertain to where we are. And you can see that already, and this is what's going to be our focus this morning, the land helps us tell the story, right? That's why you're learning at Tantur and not back in Grand Rapids, Michigan, for example. I overheard you. I don't know where you're all from, but wherever it could be, you could have learned the Bible there, but why would you do that when you could come here and see it come alive in the land? So here we are in Genesis 35. I'm going to read from verse 9. God appeared to Jacob again when he came out of Padan Aram, and he blessed him. God said to him, "Your name will no longer be called Jacob, but Israel will be your name." And so he called his name Israel. Israel in Hebrew, Yisrael, one who struggles with God. Right? So in a way, it's actually not even a very interesting name, because it's literally just describing what happened. Right? Obviously, that name will have an effect on this story for many generations, right? Literally today, we are living in, perhaps, depending on your politics, and we're going to talk about that as well, right? In a state, a political entity called Israel, right? On the land that is also known as Palestine, or anciently named Canaan. So anyway, so we have the name change from Jacob to Israel. God said to him, I am the Almighty God, be fruitful and multiply, a nation and a band of nations shall come from you, kings will come from your loins, and the land that I gave to Abraham and Isaac I will also give to you, and to your seed after you. God went up from him in that place where they spoke. Jacob set up a pillar in that place where he talked with God, a pillar of stone, and he poured a drink offering on it, and he poured oil on it. And Jacob called the name of that place where God had spoken with him, Beit El. Anybody know a little Hebrew? What's Beit El? House of God. Right, house of God. Perhaps a foreshadowing of something to come, right? What is one of the things that Jerusalem is most famous for historically? Being the house of God, right? The temple. Whether or not this location and where the temple stood is the same is a very big mystery, but we're going to get to that as well. So I'm just putting that out there. He names it the house of God. Okay? Beit El, or Bethel, sometimes I think in English, right? Where were we? Here we go. So they journeyed from Beit El, and there was but a little way to go until Ephrat. Ephrat, another city name. Okay? Is anybody here, anybody familiar with that town? Ephrat, biblical village, Ephrat? You actually all know Ephrat very well, you just don't know it yet.
Bethlehem.
Yeah. And so Rachel, Jacob's wife, right? Rachel went into labor. She had a very hard labor. And it happened when she was in labor that the midwife said to her, do not fear, you will also have this child. And so it happened as her soul was departing, for she died in childbirth. She called his name Ben-Oni, but his father called him Benjamin. And so Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrat, which is Bethlehem. Right? It says it right there in the text. This is Bethlehem. And so Jacob set a pillar upon her grave. This is the pillar of Rachel's grave to this very day. That's actually the text. I'm not saying that, although I could say that today, because there is a tradition that literally just down the road from here, at the entrance to Bethlehem, is an ancient tomb. We have no idea who's actually in it, but the tradition is, it is Rachel's tomb. Okay? So, what have we got? What's this? Why am I telling you this story? Because we are literally situated, right, with this beautiful morning view overlooking the route that seems to be perhaps connecting a place that we often think of as a house of God, right, Beit El, with another place called Bethlehem, right, referred to in the biblical text as Ephrat. And so we can literally, just from perhaps some of your bedroom windows, right, look out and imagine that Jacob was walking right here. Jacob and Rachel on the way. Rachel may be struggling a little bit, for she was in a very difficult labor, and sadly was not going to make it all the way to Bethlehem, right? So on one hand, this should hopefully inspire us, right? I mean, if you can look out your bedroom window when you wake up and see the Bible come alive, imagine what we can do if we get on a bus and actually drive around and see everything. So we're not going to see everything today, but we'll start, right? We'll get a start. But that's a lot of what we want to do together this morning and on many of the other days that I'll be with you and that many of your other teachers and guides will be with you, is that we don't want to just learn facts and stories, but we want to see the Bible come alive. We want to see the stories because these are not just stories, but they help us understand who we are and why we are, right? Jacob just isn't a character. For many of us, he's our ancestor, right? If it wasn't for Jacob, we might not have, let's say, Moses, right? If we don't have Moses, then we might not have King David. If we don't have David, then maybe we don't have a temple. If we don't have a temple, then what's Jesus doing? Right? Meaning that everything is sort of predicated on these early stories. So I want you to hopefully be inspired by many of the sights and stories that we'll be exploring together today. But we also want to challenge ourselves a little bit. Right? Part of the beauty of coming to this land, and this is why I am often so excited to be able to do what I do, is that if we're willing to dig deep enough, we find out things that maybe weren't part of the more simplistic stories that are often shared with us, shall we say, in various realms, right? Like when we go to Sunday school as kids, or even regular school, or we listen to stories from our parents, or we go to church or to synagogue or to mosque, and we learn our narratives, but we often learn them in a different form, or sort of including different details. Sometimes we embellish these stories when we tell them, especially when we're younger, so that people can really get into them. And then sometimes we cut short. We leave things out if we don't understand everything. So for example, and we'll just leave this kind of hanging for now so that we can actually get on the bus and move around, we read in this story here, in Genesis 35, that Jacob is journeying from a place called Beit El, or that he named Beit El, to a place called Ephrat/Bethlehem, or Bethlehem. And so walking on this road, connecting, right, these two places, you may have thought that Jacob would encounter another name. Is there any other name in this region, a geographic name that might be relevant to our story, that has called you and me back here to this land? Any other place name that you can think of?